Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Spider-Verse Retrospectives, and today we're going to be continuing our discussion on the Gwenverse miniseries as we take a look at Spider-Gwen, Gwenverse number 2. So, last time on Gwenverse. So Gwen Stacy, aka the Spider-Woman of Earth 65, aka Spider-Gwen, aka Ghost Spider, but we're not going to be using that last name at all, so moving on, just was essentially kind of dealing with some personal stuff. When it came down to her friends and family, they were kind of having issue with her compared to her Spider side. Her best friend, Mary Jane, felt that Gwen was prioritizing this over their friendship, or her superhero duties over their friendship, and then likewise her dad was concerned that she was doing her superheroing duties on Earth 616, the main Marvel universe, when that universe is a lot more hectic compared to Earth 65. As such, to try and get away from all this, Gwen decided to essentially pop over to the main Marvel universe and, just do some web slinging and hang out with friends and so forth. But however, as she was jumping between universes, she, or more specifically her necklace, was zapped by a light from a machine called a finalizer, a device that was supposed to be able to reincarnate whoever was caught in the blast across time and space, utilizing the templates of five Marvel superheroes, specifically Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, Wolverine, and Captain Marvel. The end result about this is that Gwen nearly got lost in the void before she was saved by Spider-Zero, but when she was brought back to Earth 65, the world that she returned to was not the same one that she left, as the world was now a lot more technologically advanced with higher skyscrapers, but also very much had a thing against superheroes, as the instant Gwen showed up in her spider suit, she was nearly arrested by a giant robotic policeman, who was later revealed to be her father in a robotic suit. And he wasn't the only one that was changed in this new present, as the first person she encountered here was a Mary Jane, who was a major kiss-ass for the government. Quickly realizing that something was awry in the time stream, Gwen and Spider-Zero began trying to figure out where exactly the cause of it was, and as Spider-Zero began re-examining the strands of Earth 65, she found that they were all connected to Gwen and also seemed to intersect at 5 points across history. And as such, in an attempt to try and fix all this and gain a better understanding of what was going on, Spider-Zero and Gwen decided that they wanted to at least try and put this world back to the way it was supposed to be, and they needed to at least gather all of these different versions of Gwen and pull them out of the time stream before they caused any major ramifications. With the first one, they went to go pick up being a version of Gwen, the version of Gwen that went on to become Thor in Norway in the year 800, which was an easier task said than done, as Thor Gwen was very much glad that she was getting the admiration, and so wasn't exactly going to give up her position so easily. However, in the meantime, at the end of time, the villain of our story, Finale, was not exactly happy with what was going on with all the Gwens. As the thing is, the finalizer was supposed to reincarnate Finale across time and space, not Gwen. And so basically, she wants, in an attempt to try and get all of her lives back, she sent out her own supervillain team, a group of villains from doomed timelines that she calls the Terminal 6, to go across time and space and kill all the different Gwens so that the Finale can get their lives back, with the issue 1 ending with her assigning a new leader to their team, one who'd be able to understand the minds of all the Gwens perfectly. And that person was an alternate version of Gwen herself. Basically, the one from the Heroes Reborn universe who was the sidekick to the superhero Nighthawk, whose name is Nightbird. And yeah, she's more willing to work with Finale because she got turned evil in the Heroes Reborn universe. But either way, yeah, that's where we are now. And issue 2 actually begins with Nighthawk and Dr. Cephalopod, the former leader of the Terminal 6, arriving in Norway in 1800, as they immediately start interrogating the locals to try and figure out where exactly Thor-Gwen is, because, yeah, when they arrive, neither Spider-Gwen or Thor-Gwen are there, and any locals that they interrogate tell them that essentially Thor-Gwen essentially abandoned them, which the instant Dr. Cephalopod gets the information he wants, he eats the person who said it. I mean, we don't actually see it, but yeah, he eats that person. But put simply, yeah, Nighthawk is able to look at all the footprints for both Gwens and realize, yeah, that they're pretty much just gone, which confuses Dr. Cephalopod because he does wonder why someone as prideful as Thor Gwen, who seemed to be loving all the admiration and attention, would end up turning on her heels and join her spider-themed counterpart. Well, it's because, Nighthawk says, she clearly offered her something that was more valuable than all that. And sure enough, we then cut to both Gwens as they are now further in the future, and we see that the thing that Spider-Gwen showed Thor-Gwen was the power of photography, which Thor-Gwen is more than happy to take in because she thinks this is more than worthy of being able to carry on her image and legacy, especially in her posterior. Yeah, for whatever reason, Thor-Gwen seems to have a thing for her butt, which, yeah, maybe it is a fine ass, but see, it's just kind of weird. Even Spider-Gwen finds this a little weird, but he finds this a little creepy. But either way, they've arrived in the time period they are, which which isn't modern day, but it at least houses modern technology. As they're driving around in a car and they're going to meet with another version of Gwen. That's essentially another one of the templates. And part of the reason why, and the thing is, as they're driving along, Spider-Gwen gave Thor-Gwen a magazine that's supposed to contain information on their next target. Specifically, they're looking for the version of Gwen who went on to become Captain America. And so basically, while Thor-Gwen was admiring all the pictures of women's butts, she was also looking up information on their, well, patriotic counterpart. And sure enough, this version of Gwen does actually have a pretty interesting backstory. In this, basically, the thing with Spider-Gwen's world was that it did already have a Captain America, a woman by the name of Samantha Wilson, who took on the mantle when Steve Rogers couldn't carry it himself. And as a result, she wound up becoming the Captain America the world that everybody knew, and how she wound up getting sent to the modern day was that she wound up getting sent through a time portal instead of being frozen for several decades. However, when it comes to Cap Gwen, her history is that she was actually inspired by Samantha Wilson, and unlike other versions of Gwen, she's an orphan, and she grew up in an orphanage. But while all the other orphans would typically spend their time roughhousing and just kind of trying to show who's the superior kid, Gwen would spend her days just, reading comics. And of course, the hero that she idolized was the Samantha Wilson Captain America. So much so that she tried to model her life after her, trying to abide by the lessons that Cap taught. Essentially try to live up to the ideal that Captain America was. And she wanted to live up to that ideal so much that she actually began to look into the super soldier serum. And when she finally got old enough and actually managed to get into chemistry school, or whatever it is, again, this is told through Thor-Gwen's point of view, and she calls it alchemy. Either way, once she got into the proper schooling, on her first day, she was able to recreate the super soldier serum herself and, well, swallowed it whole, giving her the augmented strength and agility of Captain America, and thus Gwen wound up renaming herself Gwen Rogers and decided to carry on the mantle and became the big red, white, and blue cheese herself. So that's Cap Gwen's backstory. As such, basically, the reason why Thor-Gwen and Spider-Gwen are driving around is that they plan to meet with Cap Gwen while she's doing an autograph signing at a fair. And basically, Spider-Gwen thinks that maybe this is not going to end up going well as well. After all, it was kind of a hard sell getting Thor-Gwen on her side at all. So she has absolutely no idea if they'll be able to get Cap Gwen on their side. She actually joins them really easily. In fact, once they explain the situation to her and what's really going on, she's like, okay, just let me get my shield and I'll meet you and I'll come with you guys, which, yeah, is a little bit concerning, which I'll get to my thoughts on that when I'm done talking about this issue. But put simply, yeah, this does seem, either way, at least Spider-Gwen's a little bit relieved that that's where everything came up to, which Cap Gwen states that the reason why she's so willing to accept this is because there were times when even the original Samantha Wilson did deal with multiversal shenanigans, especially considering that that there were stories where Samantha Wilson apparently did end up running into the main universe Captain America. So again, this is not new stuff to her. However, as Spider-Gwen is just standing there relieved that this will all be so easy that they can just take her out of the timeline before things go crazy, well, Thor-Gwen ends up fucking things up, because as she's running around the fair, she manages to go to one particular stall that's selling pinup calendars. Specifically, pinup calendars of Cap Gwen. And yeah, while we don't end up seeing any of the pictures for the pinup calendars, apparently they're a bit raunchy. So much so that this actually outrages Cap-Gwen, and she wants to know what the hell is going on. Even to the point where she starts questioning Thor-Gwen and Spider-Gwen and thinks that maybe they were involved in it. However, they're not responsible for it, but Thor-Gwen is not really seeing the issue here. After all, she's already kind of an exhibitionist and loves attention, so seeing these pictures of Cap-Gwen, just essentially showing everyone the goods, as we'll call it, to her is more compliment than anything. But either way, Cap-Gwen is outraged at this, and basically, as she and Thor-Gwen start arguing over it, things start getting a little bit more hectic, as Thor-Gwen summons Mjolnir with the intent of duking it out with her patriotic counterpart, which while Spider-Gwen tries to talk her down, it doesn't go well, and essentially the instant that Thor-Gwen tries smacking Cap-Gwen with Mjolnir, well, it goes the way that it did with the MCU versions of Cap and Thor when Thor tried the same thing. It just causes shockwaves that sends Thor-Gwen and Spider-Gwen flying back, and in the midst of the chaos, Cap-Gwen ends up just fleeing the scene because, well, she's got a bone to pick with the people behind that calendar. As such, the local police arrive and try to essentially question Thor-Gwen and Spider-Gwen, but Spider-Zero, who has pretty much tried hammering it in that they are trying to keep a low profile throughout all this, just tells them that they need to get out of there, and so she pulls them back to Loom World. As such, dry throw. As such, immediately they realize, well, they've already lost one. As such, they're wondering what the hell's going on, but Spider-Zero claims that their journey's not exactly over, as she's looking through the threads that are parting through Earth-65's history, she notices that there's another thread that's sort of intersecting with the Cap-Gwen thread, and so that means that there's clearly something more going on than meets the eye. But either way, whatever's going on, they still need to find where Cap-Gwen is, and thankfully, Spider-Gwen has an idea of where she may be going, as she basically looks through pinup calendar and is able to find the production logo for the people who printed it. And sure enough, the comic cuts that company as they're having a celebratory Halloween party. Pretty much all just patting themselves on the back for how well the calendars are doing and how everything is coming up roses. Unfortunately, the parties sort of crash when Cap-Gwen shows up ready to give the guy in charge a piece of her mind. And at first, he doesn't think that she's the real Cap-Gwen, because pretty much Cap-Gwen, Spider-Gwen, and Thor-Gwen were not responsible for those pinup pictures, and he just assumes that Cap-Gwen is the lady they hired for those things. But Cap-Gwen makes it clear that no, she's the real Captain America, and she has words to say for this guy, and that ultimately, if he's not going to listen to reason, then they'll settle this orphanage style. So she pretty much just tells him to put up his dukes. However, before a single punch can be thrown, well, we soon end up discovering who the one who really posed those photos are, as someone comes out from the sidelines and says, if we're going fist to fist, I got some built-in weapons right here. And sure enough, we see that the person who posed those pictures was indeed another incarnation of Gwen. This version of Gwen, but this version named Gwen Howlett, aka Wolverine. Yep. The other version of Gwen is the one that posted those pictures, and honestly, I do buy that these two versions of Gwen can simultaneously coexist in this timeline, because while Thor-Gwen would be mostly affiliated with 800 CE when it came in Norway, as she is supposed to be like a Norse god, when it comes to Wolverine, he's someone that has existed for many decades and for almost 100 years, maybe even more so. So the idea that the Gwen version of Wolverine would probably be in a similar thing, and that she's probably lived a lot longer than her Captain America counterpart has, it makes sense that she would live long enough like this, especially since the main universe Wolverine also has similar aging capabilities. It's because of his healing factor. Despite the fact that he's probably 100 years old, he looks like he's in his 20s or 40s. I forget which one. But the point is, this is essentially a battle of two Gwens, and Wolverine Gwen wound up doing what she did because she wanted to call her Captain America counterpart out. Why? Because, well, they both have a thing in common beyond them both having the same face. Essentially, Wolverine and Captain America both gained their powers and abilities through scientific experiments. Well, at least for Wolverine at least it was the claws, but you get my point. The only difference, however, is that Captain America chose to get her powers the way she did, while Wolverine, well, she got her claws because, like the main universe version, they were pretty much just forced on her. And as a result, she's a little disgusted by her Captain America counterpart and that she would do all this, and she thinks that that basically what Cap Gwen is doing is just going to keep escalating things more and more until there's essentially a superhuman arms race, and Wolverine Gwen wants to nip it in the butt first chance he gets. And basically her way of doing that is killing her Captain American counterpart. However, before things can get too dicey, that's when Spider-Gwen and Thor-Gwen arrive on the scene and try to, break this all up. Of course, everyone in the party is wondering what the hell is going on, but before the four Gwens can fully get into an explanation and try and calm everything down, well, things continue going foobar as another portal opens and two members of the Infernal Six come out and start trying to, kill all the other Gwens. And these two versions are a supervillain by the name of Roachman, who is essentially a guy from 2099 who stole a Roach costume, who I originally thought was Spider-Man, who I thought was an alternate Spider-Man, but don't quote me on that. And another supervillain by the name of Fossil, who is literally just a scientist who infused his mind into a dinosaur, but the dinosaur flesh fell off, so now all he has left is the skeleton. Either way, they're here to kill all the other Gwen templates on the order of finale, and so as a result, the quartet of Gwens end up duking it out with the two members of the Infernal Six. Of course, this results in pretty much everyone in the party just abandoning ship because at this point they're starting to realize, okay, this is not going well. We need to amscray pronto, and so it basically allows all the superheroes and supervillains free reign, though there still are two witnesses, which we'll get to when we get to the end of the comic. But either way, yeah, the Gwens end up duking it out with the supervillains, and while Fossil is a little hard to take down because he's, a giant dinosaur skeleton, basically through the combined efforts of Spider-Gwen, Thor-Gwen, and Captain America Gwen, they are able to ultimately shatter all of Fossil's and to reduce him to nothing more than a heap of bones. However, Roachman himself is not exactly down, as his suit is armed with a bunch of weapons and so forth that he fully intends to use on all of the Gwens, but Wolverine Gwen is kind of tired of dealing with this shit and decides to just go for a killing blow. As while Gwen tries to dissuade Wolverine Gwen from doing this, well, Wolverine Gwen is not her spider-themed counterpart, and while Spider-Gwen may have a little voice in her head telling her not to push the envelope, well, this is an alternate Wolverine. And so basically she ends up just stabbing him right through, as she ends up accidentally even stabbing into the cupboard behind him. That's another two members of the Terminal Six down for the count. But either way, yeah, things are getting a little bit more hectic as the actions of all the superpowered weirdos have garnered the attention of the police and so forth. So basically, all the other Gwens decide that they need to amscray as soon as possible. Though Wolverine Gwen doesn't exactly go without a fight, as they do kind of have to drag her along for the ride. But eventually they do end up bringing her back to Loom World with everyone. And Captain America Gwen does try to make peace with her, saying that while she may not like what she does, at the very least she would like to have her clawed counterpart be on their side rather than be against them. And so while Wolverine Gwen does tell her counterparts to stick it, she does say that she will stick with them for now. So yeah, they've gotten 3 more Gwens on their side, and they do get some good news. As Spider-Zero admits that basically it doesn't look like anything, so that the future is starting to look bright, as it does look like that what they're doing does seem to be having an effect on the history of Earth-65. So, maybe things are going to be looking bright for them, right? Right? Well, not so much. For one thing, Finale herself is still active in the future, and she's finally managed to find a companion that she can talk to, the talking cat from her meme named Irma. And so, she managed to grab Irma and let her know that she's going to exposit about her backstory, which we won't learn until either the next issue or the one after. Either way, it's just not important, but it's just a little thing there. But back with the party, after all the Gwens end up vacating the premises, well, we see the one who was in charge of the building the party was being held in. Specifically, a one Mr. Stark, who thankfully all the party guests did seem to amscray, but like I said, there were still 2 witnesses who didn't get out of there. You see, throughout this whole party, there were two children hiding in a cupboard and watching it all, as they wanted to see what the adults were doing, and they were willing to do whatever it took to, see the adults and all that crap. Well, those two kids were a young Howard Stark and a young Norman Osborn, who were peeping out through a little hole in the cupboard and watching everything going on at the party. All the awesome action and violence between the superheroes and the supervillains. And at the time when Wolverine Gwen stabbed Roachman through the chest with her claws, Norman was looking out through the cupboard. And that was the very cupboard that Wolverine stabbed. In other words, her actions inadvertently wound up injuring the young Norman Osborn, essentially causing him to be blinded, as we see him being hauled away on a gurney with his eyes wrapped up in bandages, and with Howard on the sidelines just holding up the costume he had for that evening, which was a knight. And so as Howard is just crying about what happened to his friend, the comic ends with him standing over Norman and telling him, "I promise I'll make you a real suit of armor." And thus, that's where this issue ends. So, there you go. Alright, so, thoughts on this issue. Again, it's decent. It's a decent continuation. Again, like with Thor Gwen, I do still find some intrigue in seeing these different versions of Gwen Stacy in these different time periods. And much like with how, despite the fact that they aren't from parallel universes, each Gwen does have distinct lives, I am still intrigued about each of these different Gwens and how they kind of fit into everything. And I do like, and let's kind of like starting off, let's talk about Cap Gwen. I do like that when it comes to her history, it is essentially directly inspired by the Earth 65 version of Captain America. After all, Earth 65 did have its own version of Cap beforehand, so I was wondering how exactly they were going to handle that, having a second Captain America show up. But I actually do like that, and the history they gave her is actually something pretty nice. That she was an orphan that grew up reading Captain America stories, and who wanted and essentially looked up to her and idolized her. So much so that she tried to embody her in any way possible, from either by trying to live as an example by following the morals that were set by the original Cap, to even deciding to follow in her footsteps proper by recreating the super soldier serum and taking it herself, and then becoming Captain America herself. In my opinion, that's actually a pretty interesting history. And then you combine that with Wolverine Gwen. Well, we don't know anything about her. At the very least, I do kind of love these clashing of these two different versions of Gwen, as even Wolverine Gwen realizes that by virtue of them essentially having the same face, they easily could be like what ifs of one another, and that Captain America Gwen could have very easily become like Wolverine Gwen if the circumstances were different. And so I do at least like that reflection, and I'll give credit where it's due. It is still cool to see these two different versions of Gwen duking it out with one another, and even having them both realize that how similar they both are. And of course, much like with Thor Gwen, Captain America Gwen and Wolverine Gwen do kind of help showcase more of the original Gwen's personality, with the Captain America Gwen being essentially embodying the part of Gwen that looked up to people, specifically her father, while Wolverine Gwen kind of takes on her anger and her just basically her anger and most of her more powerful domineering thoughts, so to speak. So, like I said, that is something that that is still a good, so basically, I do still like seeing that, and I'll give credit where it's due. It is still cool to see all the different Gwens working together when the supervillains show up and try to kill them. And I'll give credit where it's due. I like that we do get some more development on that front with Finale, as we see her sending the Terminal 6 after the Gwens. And I'll even give more credit to this. I like how the end of the issue does hint at who the next Gwen is that we're going to be meeting, as after all, if everything is all part of the same timeline, then you can start kind of seeing the pieces falling into place. Because after all, a young kid Howard Stark is telling a kid Norman Osborn, "Don't worry, I'll make you a proper suit of armor." And when it comes to the Stark lineage and suits of armor, you can probably already tell where this is gonna go. So at the very least, I am kind of liking where that's happening. And I'll even give another little thing. They do kind of address why Finale and the rest of the Terminal 6 can't just go back in time and kill the Gwens before they end up becoming superpowered. Essentially, if they did that, that would just kind of cause a split in the timeline and essentially just create alternate worlds, and basically it wouldn't fix anything. They pretty much just have to find, they essentially if they want to, and if they really want to get Finale her alternate lives back, then they need to kill the Gwens in the right time and place and actually make it count. Otherwise, it's just going to mean nothing in the long run. So there you go. That's their explanation. But despite all the positives that I do have with this comic, there are some parts about it that do annoy me a little. And believe it or not, this all kind of ties back together with having all of the Gwens be different incarnations of our main Spider-Gwen. Which, yeah, I should probably kind of bring up that elephant in the room. Why are they agreeing to help Gwen on her mission here? I mean, okay, at the end of this issue, the Gwens realize that someone was clearly hunting them. Because after all, Finale sent Fossil and Roachman to kill all of Gwen's templates, so to speak, because she wanted her life back. And so Gwen realized that, okay, someone is clearly hunting these different Gwens across time, so now we have a secondary reason for hunting them down. We want to make sure that whoever is hunting them doesn't actually be able to get the chance to kill them. So that part does make sense. But why are the Gwens still willing to help her? Because here's the thing, as we already established, these versions of Gwen are not from parallel universes. They're different reincarnations of her across time. And the thing is, they didn't just come from nowhere. With how they were each reincarnated, each version of Gwen had a life on Earth 65 prior to becoming a superhero. Thor Gwen was a peasant woman who wanted attention but was always ignored, but finally managed to get that admiration when she found Mjolnir and gained the power of Thor. Captain America Gwen was an orphan who grew up idolizing the Earth 65 Captain America until she eventually went on to become her. And Wolverine Gwen is implied that to wound up going through similar shit to the main universe Wolverine, having mutant powers, being experimented on to get the claws. Basically, all of these Gwens had lives on Earth 65. And yet, the thing is, the original purpose of Spider-Gwen's mission and gathering all these different versions of herself isn't because they're trying to fight back against a common threat. It's because she's trying to take them out of the timeline before they do things that will drastically alter her present. Which, yeah, this is where I kind of find this a little bit iffy for a premise. Because what's gonna happen to these Gwens after this is all over? I mean, really. I know how things are gonna play out. I've read through the comic, but what were Gwen and Spider-Zero's plans with these other Gwens after they pulled them out of time? Say that what they're doing does end up helping Earth 65 in the long run. That by taking each of these Gwens out of the timelines when they do, it causes Earth 65's history to straighten out back to the way it was supposed to be. Well, what's gonna happen to the other Gwen Stacys? Are they just gonna be erased? Are they gonna just plop them somewhere and let them try and find something akin to a life? I don't understand it. It doesn't really make sense. Especially because the thing is, because I don't really see a reason, because again, there's nothing really for them to go back to. By virtue of them being pulled out of time, they're all being told your lives were never meant to exist, and you're not supposed to be living at all. So, what will they have to go back to? At least in previous storylines, the spiders had lives they could go back to, as each of them were from parallel dimensions, and once the threat had passed, everyone was allowed to go home. But for Gwenverse, there is no home to go back to. Even if they wanted to go back to their respective times and continue doing the things they were doing, well, they can't. They're not allowed to. Because if they go back to those points in time, it'll continue drastically altering the timeline for Earth 65. And as a result, it essentially means that these Gwens are agreeing to essentially just be erased. And I don't mean like they're actually being erased, so to speak, but they're all essentially agreeing to abandon their lives just because this one version of them wants to tell them, sorry, but your guys' existence is kind of screwing up my world, so you guys need to go away. Which, I don't really understand why the Gwens would want to agree to that, would want to agree to join their spider-themed counterpart under those circumstances. Yes, Finale does eventually come back into play, and the need to find all the Gwens does become higher priority, knowing that they're all in danger from Finale and the Terminal 6. But the thing is, why would, forgetting the Finale connection, why would the Gwens want to help want to help their spider themed counterpart? Because I wouldn't. If I met another version of me who said, your life was never meant to exist, you're just a reincarnation of me who's screwing with history and you have to come with me so we can put it back, I wouldn't want to listen to this guy because I have a life here. All of these Gwens had lives that they're essentially being told they have to abandon because they weren't supposed to exist. And I don't understand why they would want to follow Gwen under those circumstances. At least in the previous verse events, there were reasons for why all the different versions of these characters would meet up. In Spider-Verse and Spider-Geddon, it was a matter of survival. The Inheritors were hunting Spideys across the multiverse, and the Spideys decided the best course of action was to band together to fight back and stop them. And then, of course, in Venomverse, they were dealing with enemies who were specifically hunting anyone with a symbiote. So it made sense for Venomized Doctor Strange to gather all the symbiotic heroes together to at least try and bolster their chances of taking the poisons down. And then even in the previous Spider-Verse miniseries, what was going on there was essentially a search and rescue. Miles Morales was jumping from universe to universe trying to find Aunt May Parker, helping the Spideys along the way, and when he eventually did find her, he gathered a gaggle of Spideys who he and Spider-Zero thought would be able to provide backup when they went and rescued her. But for this story, up until Finale finally meets, or up until Finale's forces finally cross paths with the Gwens and so forth, there's no real reason for why I see them wanting to be with Gwen. Gwen, I feel, was egotistical and wanted to see the wonders of the future when she was introduced to photography, especially when last issue she was complaining to a peasant woman how her drawing didn't perfectly capture Gwen's derriere and all that crap. But why would Captain Gwen want to join up with her? I know she said, I read these other issues of Captain America where she wound up dealing with alternate universe stuff before. But the thing is, unless Spider-Gwen lied about where they're from, this doesn't make sense why she'd be willing to go along with it, because they're not from other universes. They are from different time. They're from different points in time, and Gwen is essentially recruiting Cap Gwen to abandon everything she built, which I understand. She's supposed to be a Captain America, and Captain Americas are typically meant to be selfless, heroic, and think of others before they think of themselves. But I failed to see how any version of Cap would be okay with just abandoning everything they built up and then just deciding to say, well, I guess I'm done. I wasn't supposed to exist anyway, so bye everyone. Hope you enjoyed my heroics. Like, I don't understand that. It really doesn't make sense to me. And I'll hold back this criticism for Wolverine Gwen, because at this point, that's when the Finale's forced attack and the Gwens realize that they're being hunted, so they do need to try and gather the remaining Gwens as quickly as possible. And likewise, that would result in Wolverine Gwen deciding, okay, maybe I do need to stick with these guys for now. But at the very same time, it just feels weird to me that the Gwens are willing to participate in all this, knowing why they're being pulled together at all. So yeah, that's definitely kind of an iffy thing. With that said, though, the rest of the issue itself is still perfectly fine. The artwork is still nice and good. The action is still cool. It's nice seeing all the Gwens working together. We see more plot progression with the Gwens as they finally cross paths with Finale's forces, which does result in the deaths of two more members of the Terminal Six. It's cool seeing their team expand and not seeing the Gwens both bicker and duke it out and eventually try and put their differences aside. And the hint at what we're going to be seeing next issue with the young Howard Stark saying he's going to build Norman Osborn a proper suit of armor is some nice foreshadowing for the next Gwen we're going to see. So I will say this, there's still enough in the issue that you can enjoy, and it does at least continue the story. It's just that this one fundamental plot point does make me scratch my head and wonder exactly what it makes me wonder exactly what the pitch that Spider-Gwen is giving to these Gwens is. So yeah, a decent issue, but definitely one that started raising more questions than I would like. So there you go. But yeah, I think that's really all I have to say. I still hope you enjoyed the video. I thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on Tuesday as we look at issue 3. So till then, I hope you have a good evening, and take care.